What is a seemingly harmless parenting mistake that will majorly fuck up a child later in life? I found that when my parents teased me about stuff I was clearly uncomfortable with, it made me tell them less later in life. I have a good relationship with my parents, but I don't tell them lots about my life because it's easier if they don't know tease about it. Commenter, same for me. It was usually mild stuff like, oh, KMCU has a crush on a girl or something like that, but I hated the attention and it made me uncomfortable. Later in my 20s, when I met my wife, she couldn't understand why I was so secretive. I'm pretty sure it's from that. I just stopped telling people things and still don't tell my parents everything that's going on in my life. I love them, of course, and have a great relationship with my parents, but yeah, I'm pretty sure the teasing messed me up. Story 2. Never saying sorry to your kids. My mom only just recently started telling me sorry when she gets worked up. It's built up such a resentment for her over the years, and I also have trouble saying sorry myself because of it. Tell your kids sorry, especially if you overreact to something they did. Commenter 1. This is my mom too. Sometimes it feels like she would rather jump off a cliff before admitting she was wrong and apologize. Commenter 2. I'm sort of glad that my mom isn't the only one who acts like this. She's actually working on that issue, since me and my siblings are older now and can call her out on it without many consequences. It just sucks because she only started working on it once I left for college. I wish she had told me sorry once when I was younger. Story 3. Not following through with your promises. If you told your child you were buying ice cream tomorrow in the hopes that they'd forget, and the next day, when they ask you tell them no, they'll see you as unreliable. Ice cream is just the first thing that came to my mind. I'm sure someone else can explain better what I'm trying to say here without sounding so ridiculous. Commenter. I taught my children at very young ages that outside of extreme circumstances, failing to keep a promise made is the same as telling a lie. Therefore, I won't make promises to them that I'm not absolutely certain I can keep. They learned early in life that I take my promises very seriously and will go to great lengths to honor them. We have hit very hard times recently, and I have had to delay delivery on some promises, which breaks my heart. But they know that I will fulfill those promises eventually and are much more empathetic and understanding than their peers have been in similar situations. Story 4. Never telling your child that you were wrong and that you're sorry. Just never once occurred. My father never once said I'm sorry to me. He was human. There were plenty of times he should have. My kids have heard from me plenty. Commenter 1. Once my brother was sent to his room by my dad, after they got into an argument about something stupid, I used Google to prove my brother right, and we both were grounded for being disrespectful. Until he found out we were actually right. He never ungrounded us until the week was over, and only told me he was wrong. Moral of the story being right is disrespectful. Commenter 2. I remember several occasions when my father would accuse me of doing something I shouldn't have. And a couple of times I was legitimately innocent, and I would say I didn't do it, or some such thing. He'd counter with, "Are you calling me a liar?" And I was pretty much ducked after that. There was no way I was going to get out of whatever punishment was heading my way. Dad was always right, even when he wasn't. Commenter 3. I spent 3 days being berated by my father, called pissant, liar, thief. This was over a cigarette in a tube that got stolen from his office. I did smoke at the time, but I did have a job and actually didn't need to steal smokes. Anyway, after 3 days or the Gestapo treatment, my brother admitted he took it. I didn't hear one word of apology from him. I resent him 25 years later. Story 5. I feel like most of these responses fall under seemingly harmful. A seemingly harmless mistake is rewarding your child with something when they do something they already enjoy. Take, for example, reading. If a child just enjoys reading, let the child read without giving any reward. Once you start rewarding the child for that act, their intrinsic motivation gets replaced. It's called the over-justification effect. Commenter. Ha! I was a kid who loved to read, still do. And whenever we participated in a program that rewarded reading hours, like the library summer program where you got raffle tickets and could win stuff like baseball and museum tickets, I felt like the most glorious scammer. Joke's on you, Pizza Hut. I would have done all that reading anyway. Suckers! I still remember that feeling. My third grade class won an award that for some reason was a comically large chocolate bar. For having read the most books in a specific time frame, I walked home with a hunk of chocolate the size of my fist. The fools. I would have read that much anyways. Commented 2. Or worse, rewarding with candy or sweets. Not only does it make behaviors that should be intrinsically rewarding behaviors extrinsically rewarded, it develops an unhealthy relationship with sugar, tying the idea of pleasure and value to sweetness. Once kids with that connection get old enough to buy their own sugar, they retain the connection and can simply reward themselves constantly, increasing the likelihood of developing disordered eating patterns. Story 6. In a different vein of thought, making finance is a taboo subject. Financial illiteracy can be devastating once entering adulthood. Want to keep your children from making your own money mistakes? Don't be too proud to teach them what those mistakes were, and to clarify, I don't mean robbing your children of their innocence by putting the weight of your debt on them at an early age, but rather teaching them how to properly budget their money as they earn it, how to build savings, what credit is, and how to responsibly manage it. Credit utilization, the danger of revolving balances, not using credit as an emergency fund. Teach them about predatory interest rates and the true cost of a loan. Set realistic expectations for costs of living, etc. Commenter, on the same note, don't make your children feel like they're the source of all your financial woes. Talking about finances and complaining about finances are very different things. And don't keep on harping on how much you sacrificed for them and make it sound like they ruined your life. Story 7, don't smother your kids. My mom quit having her own life the moment my brother and I were born. She was an incredibly devoted and loving mother, was very kind to us, but when we were born, she stopped having friends, did not work, and was home every single day from when I was born to when I moved out in my early 20s. She was very easy to upset because she had no other source of self-esteem, and anytime I screwed up, and I screwed up a lot, it was as if I had levied a very personal attack against her. In the last 5 years or so before I left, I don't think we had a single conversation that didn't drive her to tears, and I promise I wasn't that bad. I constantly felt cornered and stressed and fell into depression as a defense mechanism. And she took my resulting lack of performance very personally, creating a very treacherous cycle that was only broken when I enlisted and finally got away. To this day, I often feel like I'm a bad person who failed to live up to her love. Story 8, not congratulating your child when they achieve something. A friend of mine never got any praise from his parents growing up. Always felt that he wasn't good enough. Show the child that their hard work doesn't go unnoticed. Story 9. Not creating a safe space for your kids to tell their secrets and make mistakes. When I was younger, I excitedly confided in my mom about my first boyfriend. But instead of calmly talking me through this, she immediately brought my dad in the conversation, and they both yelled at me and forced me to break up with him. Commenter, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table and forced me to write a letter to my boyfriend and tell him that I didn't want to see him anymore. I cried the entire time. After I was done, they posted pictures of the letter all over Facebook and acted like it was so cute. Holy crap, I'm so sorry. To bring public humiliation on top of the forced breakup? That is cold. I hope you're okay. Story 10. If you qualify for food stamps, take the ducking food stamps. Do not make your kid live on macaroni and cheese made with water because we don't take handouts. Commenter, pride can be such a dangerous thing. The health, safety, and well-being of your children should trump anyone's pride IMO. Story 11. Not stopping when your child says, stop, whether it's teasing or tickling or resting. Kids who have parents that don't respect their boundaries always seem to end up being the biggest bananas and bullies because they've learned they don't have to respect other people's feelings. Commenter, my dad would squeeze my knee to tickle me, but it would quickly turn painful and he wouldn't stop until I cried. I would beg him to stop, but he wouldn't until it got to that point. Story 12. The saddest part of this question is that my mom had done so many things that everyone is saying is bad. Not hugging, praising, telling me to suck it up, etc. So let me give one that I feel would have helped me out growing up. Do not be afraid to admit when you are wrong or when you make mistakes to your child. My parents would go out of their way to justify any mistake they made and make it seem as if they were right no matter what the situation was. Gave me a pretty messed up view of right and wrong as well as learning from mistakes, but was fixed by my grandma. It's a long story that I don't want to get into right now. Silver on my first ever comment, and it pertains to my crafty childhood. But on a serious note, I want to reiterate the importance of not only advice, but the consequences of not taking said advice. X. My parents never congratulated me on good grades, doing the right thing, etc. They would only say, that's what you're supposed to do, or you better keep it up, and threaten me if I didn't live up to their expectations. So now, as an adult, I'm insanely suspicious, and at the same time worried of people complimenting me or congratulating me for anything I do. Commenter, my parents won't ever address anything specifically. They just say, we did the best we could with what we had at the time, but they really didn't. But because they are giving that blanket answer that allows room for mistakes, but not responsibility, we can't ever talk about it. And sometimes they just flat out lie and reinvent history from my childhood and teenage years to make themselves look better. Sometimes I feel like they really believe their own rewrites. Story 13, mocking them, laughing at them. Adults do it to each other all the time, but kids who haven't been immersed in the background cruelty of our culture for years don't understand that it's just the language of the land, and not that they themselves are particularly unworthy of respect. Commenter, I got laughed at and mocked a few times as a kid, and that crap hurts a lot. There was one time I was trying to help a friend at their birthday by taking their presents to them, but all the adults and my parents thought I was being selfish and wanted them for myself and joked and laughed at me and just ignored me explaining myself and carried on. I think that hurt my self-esteem a lot in the long run. Story 14. Well, realistically, it'd be a helicopter parent. You always want to look out for your kid, right? Make sure they're not doing things they're supposed to do. Walk in without knocking. It ruins a relationship with a kid because even though you have a sense of privacy, the kid doesn't and will always paranoid of anyone entering their room without warning. It ruins a kid. Would my mom let me do this? Is she okay with it? Commenter. My parents were helicopter parents. I was not allowed to lock my bedroom door. My mom listened in on my phone calls, this was in landline phone days, and went through my personal belongings when I wasn't home, including reading the notes that friends and I passed in school. I wasn't allowed to talk to boys or date. I'm female. Doing this only prevents your children from learning how to form healthy relationships. You should teach your children how to do things, such as date, in a safe and responsible manner rather than ban it. Story 15. Not giving them a factual and straightforward sex ed talk. My parents answered my questions truthfully and at an age-appropriate level throughout my childhood, and I'm extremely thankful for it. Others around me have clearly not been that lucky. Story 16. Getting them involved in problems they have no control over. My parents felt the need to keep me in the loop regarding our pending foreclosure and argue in front of me over which one was to blame when I was 10. What possible reason is there to share that with a kid? I barely slept for months. I was convinced the cops were going to bust in at midnight and throw us all outside. Story 17. Giving in to your kids' wants and desires without upholding discipline and consequences will give your kids a large uphill battle to climb later. I say this BC, my parents babied me a lot when I was young. I never had to do anything I didn't want to do. X. When I started getting bad grades BC, I wasn't doing my homework. My parents would have conferences with my teachers so they could give me extra credit. I had a rude awakening in college when I realized how hard life is. I 100% love and adore my parents. And who's to say if they did discipline me more that I'd have turned out any different? Probably not, but you never know. But when I have kids, I already know I have few things I do differently. Commenter. My father gave up telling me to clean my room, so he did it for me more than once. My mom saw how much I was struggling with math, so she did my math homework for me. Now, as an adult, I struggle with organization and keeping my home clean. I also avoid math as much as I possibly can. My mind just shuts down when I see simple math problems. Story 18. Pretty much telling you that whatever activity that you enjoy doing is annoying or dumb. I used to love to sing. I was in chorus and would play my favorite songs over and over to learn the words. Not only did my sisters tease me for it, but my parents told me to shut up constantly, so I stopped singing. I must have been terrible, right? I sing when I'm alone or jokingly with some friends. What really broke me was when I went to visit everyone for the holidays, and my sister said that she was surprised I never pursued singing since I seemed to love it so much when I was younger. I nearly started crying and had to bite my tongue so I wouldn't scream at her for being one of the reasons I stopped. It's always funny for the ones doing the teasing, but it actually hurts the ones being teased, especially when it's coming from people who are supposed to love you. Commenter. I won a scholarship for singing while I was in primary school, private lessons twice a week. One day my dad stopped taking me, saying he couldn't afford them anymore. At the time, I didn't know the lessons were already paid for from the scholarship. My arsehole father thought it was lame and the lessons were useless. Story 19. When I was 4, my parents adopted a kitten. Of course, I had never seen anything quite so delightful before, and I could barely keep my hands off the little fur ball. So about 2 or 3 days passed. I get up in the morning and walk out and ask, "Where is the kitten?" And my parents told me that he died, implying that my roughhousing had killed it. I was terrified to touch an animal for several years thereafter. In fact, they had simply given the kitten back to the people they got it from. Story 20. I grew up in a very strict Asian household. My parents were very strict on the never wake us up policy. To this day, I get very anxious and refuse to wake people up, in fear of being yelled at and locked in a closet. I'm 22 years old. Commenter. Crap, I'm a different Asian, and I can corroborate that my parents and that dude in the comment above's parents were using the same notes because I ended up locked up in a closet. And let me tell you, from the perspective of the child, that experience is very scary. It's quite terrifying, and on top of that, you as a kid are aware of your small size and helplessness before anyone bigger than you, basically everyone. So, by forcing something like being placed somewhere you can't escape from, triggers an instant panic response that I don't think grown-ups understand the magnitude of that response and its impact on the psyche. From the perspective of these parents, the child is merely upset by the punishment. That is where they have gone horribly wrong and show that they lack the capacity to empathize with the thoughts and feelings of a child. Edit. This thing is getting a bit more attention than I thought. I wanted to be a little more detailed into what happened because just calling it locked in the closet isn't really close to painting an accurate description. I had my hands and feet tied on a child-sized wicker chair and I was gagged, then placed in an empty bedroom while my folks pretended to leave the apartment. Whatever shock value this disciplinary action meant to convey, all I got out of it was to not trust them anymore. The happy family facade seemed to be just that to me from then on. A facade and a sham set up for the benefit of the people watching us. Internally, I knew I would one day become an adult, and I'd be able to be on my own away from this family, and I always waited for that phase in my life where I'd be free and independent. Story 21. Telling your kid they are always a winner. We love our kids and want them to feel special, but it's setting them up to be disappointed later in life when they find out not everyone can win. Let them feel the disappointments early on and teach them it's okay. They'll grow up better able to handle the stresses of life. I always hated playing games with my younger brother for this reason. It was always let him win. He's 7 years younger. Story 22. Treating crying as if it's something only weak people do. My dad in particular used to yell at me for crying, which only made me cry more, which made him yell more, and you get the point. In high school, I tried to bring up the possibility of me having anxiety problems that I'd spoken to the school counselor about because my friends made me go since they were worried. He told me I was just a drama queen. I can't express that I'm anxious or stressed around my dad because others have it worse. Even now I'm 21 and seeing a psychiatrist in a couple of weeks because I've just felt so bad lately and I would never let my dad know. I think I'd rather die than my dad know I've been seeing a psychiatrist and discussing the possibility of me having OCD with said psychiatrist, which does explain a lot and is actually kind of comforting for me to know, because he'd get so mad at me for being weak. Story 23. I have a few, thinking that whenever they open their mouth, they're going to lie to you. Telling them that they're just being dramatic whenever they're actually upset about something. Telling them that they're being manipulative whenever they show their feelings, tears. Story 24. Making them give physical affection when they don't want to. If Uncle Bob makes them uncomfortable, don't make them give him a hug. If Aunt Karen freaks them out, don't make them give her a kiss. Of course, it's important that they be kind, but don't teach them that the feelings of others is more important than their bodily autonomy. Story 25. Sticking through a toxic ducking relationship. For the kids, it doesn't help. Part ways. Be good parents, spend quality time together with the kids, but don't stay together and ducking hate your lives under the guise of it being for the kids. We pick up on your crap. It's a terrible example to set. Ooh. Story 26. Not having them do chores. My parents pushed me to be academic, so doted on me hand and foot as a kid to make more room for study. When you're too young and stupid to know any better, you think it's a blessing. When I moved out to uni, I didn't really know how to clean, when to clean, what to clean with, how to wash clothes, how to get them dry, etc. The only thing I could do is cook and binge drink. That's no way to bring up a kid, and it's a steep learning curve doing all that stuff for the first time in your early 20s. It sounds like a super lame answer, but make sure every kid does their fair share of chores. Story 27. Discouraging them from asking questions. Yes, it can be annoying to keep hearing, but why daddy mummy? But I've met far too many adults who admit they stopped asking questions because as a kid, their parents would shut them up or be like, there, she goes asking questions again. Inquisitive minds need that fostered. Inquisitive. Story 28. Telling them they are smart. I'm not saying to not praise them for a job well done, but reinforcing that a child is smart will teach them that they don't need to try as hard to learn. Education should be a constant challenge in the same way exercise should always be a challenge. If it's not difficult, you're not learning. Story 29. Saying, I don't care who started it. I grew up with friends whose siblings would target the one with the bad temper, provoke them into a rage, then cry and play victim when they got slapped. In this case, it does matter who started it. A parent has to make it clear that violence isn't okay, but neither is provoking someone into said violence. It doesn't matter that said person never hit or kicked while their sibling did. They never would have gotten hurt in the first place if they didn't encourage the aggression to begin with. Children are clever and will find loopholes in their parents' rules. Parents need to be better and snuff out that kind of BS when it starts. If they don't, they'll raise a manipulator and a scapegoat. One will use them, and one will resent them. It's a lose-lose, all because of a simple rule. Story 30. Telling them not to cry or telling them to suck it up. That one messed me up for a good while. Edit. The only thing I learned from this comment is that y'all have some crap parents. I hope you've grown since then. Stay strong. Commenter. My dad loved crap like this. Some of his favorites. I was grounded to my room for an entire summer. Twice. 3 months with only my room and the bathroom and dinner with the family. He took my entire Magic: The Gathering collection, which I bought with my own money, and told me I could have it back if I passed a class. After I passed the class, he revealed he incinerated them so that I wouldn't go snooping and take, then back. Kicked me out of the house for not mowing the lawn properly. I had to live with a friend for weeks. Guess how much we talk now. Edit. A few more this is dredged up from my memories. Threw my Game Boy out of a moving car because he found out I was playing Pokemon. Pokemon was verboten in our house. I borrowed a friend's copy. It was the only entertainment I brought on a road trip from Illinois to Colorado and back. Made me take a home substances test often and at random. I never drank or did substances at all. Told me I could never ever go to my friend's house at night ever again because I was 17 minutes late getting home. Grounded me from my car for getting home late and wouldn't drive me to anything. I was in marching band, a play, and had a class that started before the bus came. Had to walk to and from school for all of those. Story 31. Creating an environment where you tell your kid their feelings aren't valid just because they aren't the same as yours, or your kid processes their emotions differently than you. Angrily telling your kid they are too sensitive / dramatic / theatrical / hormonal / etc. is just going to mess your kid up and encourage them to bottle emotions up to avoid upsetting you, and is going to lead to major communication issues. Also, constantly pushing an intelligent or self-motivated child to work harder and do better. You're setting your kid up to be a perfectionist, which can be incredibly damaging to his or her mental health in the long run. Story 32. Telling kids they have to finish their plate. Sometimes there's too much food. I was overeating for years, and it took a lot of work to break the habit and shed the extra weight. Story 33. Never showing up for events. I remember my parents didn't come to most of my chorus concerts. It really sucked to see my classmates' families cheer them on while my parents were absent. I brought home one of my chorus program papers to show my parents, and I found it in the trash the next day. I was sad because I wanted to keep it, but seeing it in the trash, I didn't want it anymore. Edit. I love my parents, and I don't blame them for not showing up. They are small business owners, and it was hard for them to find people who could work for them whenever I had concerts or anything. It still hurt, though. Also, the replies to this are very sad. I'm sorry that a lot of you guys went through similar experiences. Second edit. Also, my mom is a clean freak. She'll discard or move any stray papers laying around. She probably didn't think much of it. She might not have even realized what it was. She can't read English that well. It's her third language. After I told her, she apologized to me, so it's okay. I thought I should add that my little sister and grandma would come to them. But my relationship with my grandma isn't great. It's just not the same as having your parents there, if that makes sense. Story 34. This is serious. I carry deep regrets over this. My kids were really wounded by my failing to properly memorialize the deaths of their sisters. We had 2 normal kids. Then my wife was pregnant and gave birth to 2 babies as a very late term. I held them and they were small babies. Charity's birthday is in 2 days. Hannah was born October 10th. We thought we did all the right things. We took their cremains and with our children, put one into the sea and another into a friend's lake. We talked about the loss occasionally, but we didn't do a lot of things we could have done. Memorialize their birthdays, Christmas ornaments for them, that sort of tangible stuff that kids can grasp. As it turns out, both of them grieved those losses deeply. They were 4 and 5 and we thought they barely understood it. But we were wrong. And it really wounded them and they exploded with anger and hurt at us a couple of years ago. We handled it well. We got counseling. We apologized. We started correcting course. Right now, neither of them really speak to us. They cannot seem to forgive us for that oversight of not properly memorializing their sisters, and it's tearing us apart. We were so close, and now they are so distant and act so incredibly injured over this. And I'm a profession in an associated area, and so is my wife. We can't even grasp the depths of this loss from a professional, let alone personal perspective. So include your kids in on these sorts of hurts and losses. That's my deepest regret as a parent. Since it's just a couple of days until Charity's birthday, she would have been 16. So my wife and I are pretty sad right now, especially since we want to be responding to our kids, 19 and 21, away at college. Criticism of our past neglect. But now they won't allow that to happen, which is frustrating. On Thursday, I'm going to have flowers delivered to my daughter that tell her I love her and that it's okay to be sad today. I don't know exactly what I'm sending my son, but I'll figure something out with a similar message. And my wife will get flowers and a lot of hugs. Part of what I've learned from this and some of your comments have helped me understand it more deeply. Love and loss go together. You can't separate them, no matter what. Story 35. The words, "Oh, look who finally decided to join us," when referring to you coming out of your room when guests are over. Way to ease your child into social anxiety. Story 36. Anytime a child is playing with a child of the opposite gender and they respond, "Oh, who's your boy girlfriend?" That crap completely stopped me from even speaking to girls until damn near high school. Story 37. Having kids before you have worked on your own psychological issues. These issues will always be a part of the relationship between you and your child. You can't hide it. Become the person you want to be before having children. Story 38. Not letting them have freedoms, such as going out with friends, making their own friends, things such as these. I'm 17 and I'm just now getting actual friends outside of school. I was never allowed to go do anything as a kid. I know it's my parents caring about me, but it's hurt me more in the long run. It's caused some serious social anxiety. Story 39. Not signing the permission slip, missing out on those trips, hurts to a certain extent, and will make the kid feel marginalized partially, since more often than no, the trip will be a recurrent topic. Story 40. I was like 7. I told my mom this spooky dream I had and asked her specifically not to tell anyone. We went to family dinner with her whole large side of the family, and she told everyone at the dinner table. Never told her anything again, Lamau. Story 41. This is probably going to be buried in the comments, but is so important to me that I'm going to write it anyway. My parents unconsciously taught me to value external validation over everything else, and has been the cause of persistent depression in my adult life. Examples that seem innocent: praising good grades and emphasizing academic achievement, being inordinately pleased when people said good things about me to them, encouraging me to apply for awards and scholarships, and then being super proud and boastful to others about how amazing I am, tacking up newspaper articles about me, certificates, etc., all over the house, writing Christmas letters that were essentially a laundry list of all my accomplishments, telling me that I could do anything I wanted to or be anything I wanted, that I was exceptional. I think you get the idea. All this taught me that I am only worth what I can do. It has taught me that I am only as valuable as others deem me to be. Outwardly, I appear poised and accomplished and successful. Inwardly, I have an exceedingly low, virtually non-existent sense of self-worth. I push myself constantly to do more and achieve more and earn more accolades. I burn out and have panic attacks. I feel numb inside. I don't know who I am or what I actually enjoy because I've been groomed only to do what others want of me. I'm almost 40 and basically completely lost. Edit, thank you for the gold. Story 42. Anyone who is a parent or ever hopes to be a parent, please never tell your child. I would be so sad if you turned out to be gay/lesbian/trans. I just came out to my family this year. I'm 21. And my mom cried about how she didn't feel like a good mother because I didn't tell her sooner and told other people. She doesn't even remember that she said that. I, on the other hand, will never forget it. I know this isn't what anyone in the family wanted. Edit. Not to throw my mom entirely under the bus, because although it was a difficult coming out, she does love and accept me. However, this one single comment, she said this when I was 13 or 14, majorly fueled my fear of coming out to my parents. I thought it would make me a huge disappointment and embarrassment. Story 43. Hovering over your child. I don't mean just helicopter parenting, which generally crosses the line into abuse. I mean doing things like demeaning their choices, trying to steer them down a certain career path, putting them in programs, sports they don't like, etc. Story 44. Constant remarks about the child's body, like telling them they need to lose, gain weight, or making any comment about their body type. It goes for everyone in the family. Do not do that, unless you want your child to develop an ed later on in life. Story 45. Yelling at them. My mother yelled at me constantly growing up, and I ended up learning some really insidious, subtle lessons and struggling with anxiety because of it. Story 46. Something that's way too common is acting before understanding why your child did something. Almost every adult has the unconscious misconception that children are evil by nature and need to be sanctioned to get the evilness out of them. So if a child does something bad, a lot of parents automatically and unconsciously assume that the child did this on purpose and out of evilness. Then they punish the child because they think they need to teach them that evilness won't be tolerated. There are things children need to learn not to do. But in a lot of cases, parents need to understand that children act the way they act because it's their only option. For example, a kid doesn't scream at their parent because it's evil, but because it's their only chance to mark a border that his parents repeatedly crossed. The problem here is the communication within the family, not the child. So you need to understand the real problem and work on your family's communication. Punishing your child is just an easy way to deal with it, but not a solution. Story 47. Giving them issues with food. When I was growing up, my mom called me fat and put me on all kinds of diets, starting when I was 6 years old. I'd go to the neighbor's house and beg for something to eat because I was starving. Now that I'm an adult, I hide food from and I just hate that I do that. Story 48. Trying to solve your kids' attention problems by scolding them for not doing their homework, even though they've been sitting in front of it for hours. This only ever lowered my self-esteem rather than solve any kind of problem, and it still ducks with me today. Story 49. In my experience, the inability to keep a conversation light and positive. For example, if I received an A on a test and I brought it up at the dinner table, within 5 minutes, we would be having a tense discussion about some other class I should be doing better in, or it has turned negative on one of my siblings. Why the heck would I bother bringing something up if it's going to remind you of something you yell about regularly? In the same vein, The inability to withhold more important discussions for another time. My parents never considered planning a sit-down with me for a serious discussion about something I am doing wrong or did wrong. Rather, they'd spring it on me when I'm trapped in a car with them, or at the dinner table, or when I'm least expecting it or simply need to be doing something else. Important discussions were simply interjected into everyday life, and it led to me having bad anxiety and the inability to just relax around my parents. This may actually be part of some larger complex I have about my parents not having healthy divisions between themselves and other individuals. Like they don't respect or acknowledge that their kids are fully separate people who think in different ways. If I was living in a way that disappointed my parents throughout my adult life, they would die young and allow it to take decades of their lives because they are so intertwined in other people's business. They would never think their adult children deserve the respect of like a coffee date or lunch in order to discuss a big issue. It would just be spewed out at the wrong time. They have no emotional intelligence and are the most judgmental people I've ever met. Story 50. Flex's fingers being overly rigid about table manners, to the point of physically correcting how your 19-year-old child is holding a fork over the age of about 12, timing your children's meals and taking their plates away if they go over time, mocking them for not knowing how to eat unfamiliar foods correctly. I get an eating disorder. My brother gets an eating disorder. Everyone gets an eating disorder. Spending more time dwelling on how evil and wrong premarital sex, dating, and the gays are than you do on, "You are my child and I love you." Good way to make sure your son has sex with his girlfriend, who fortunately knows more about safe sex than he does because you never bothered to teach him. One of daughters has a girlfriend, the other is dating someone older than you are, and they all plan to get married sometime in the next 5 years without inviting or informing you. Using asterisk anything asterisk they tell you confidentially against them. Want your kids to never trust your or anyone with personal information. Way to go! Making an asterisk really asterisk big deal out of them displaying behavior you want. Oh wow, look, everyone. Nina finally came out of her room. Wow, Nina. I bet that was really hard for you. By 16, Nina comes home only to sleep. Story 51. Physical punishment and getting overly angry with your children. My brother is having issues with getting fully potty trained, and my dad's response is to spank him every time he doesn't use the bathroom. And he tries to scare him into using the toilet by screaming at him while he's on it. My dad doesn't seem to realize all this is doing is traumatizing my brother and making it even harder for him to use the restroom. Any attempt to broach the topic with my dad is met with anger towards me, and he doesn't seem to take into account that this is literally my area of study, developmental psychology. Story 52. Continuing to tickle your children after they ask you to stop. My dad and older brother would tickle me as a child to the point that I peed my pants, despite me begging them to stop. It started as young as I can remember and didn't stop until I was approximately 10. I was laughing because it tickled, not because I liked it, and I meant it when I told them no. But they would keep going anyways. I now hate being tickled and have serious issues saying no when I am uncomfortable and maintaining my own physical boundaries. Teach your children their language is powerful. When they say no, even if it's playful, listen to them. Story 53. It's always things that are a lot more subtle than you think that can have unexpected and lasting effects. For me, as a child, I was always ahead of my class, and my parents always praised my high marks. I never studied to get them. I was able to do it naturally without effort in primary school and a lot of high school. It wasn't until the end of high school and the start of university that I started to see the effects it had on me. I never learned to study properly and never learned how to properly put effort into something to get results. This started to affect my grades, and the straight, as I used to get where dropping to CS and DS, I had to teach myself to study properly to get back to BS. It also made me the bad kind of perfectionist. If I couldn't do something perfectly and get praise for it, why even bother trying at all? That's been the biggest struggle for me all through my life. Story 54. Downplaying things that are bothering your kids. It's something my parents did out of love and trying to help. If I was upset by something, I'd tell them, "I'm having trouble with underscore, underscore, underscore." And they'd try to lighten it by saying, "There is no reason to struggle with underscore, underscore, underscore. It's all fine and totally easy to handle if you just do X, Y, Z, E." It was the response to everything. Whether I was sad about fights with friends or worried about the future or frustrated having trouble in school was much later diagnosed. They just wanted me to feel better and be encouraged. But I've realized later it gave me the impression that by having negative feelings in the first place, I was somehow at fault for not looking at it the right way. Caused me to bottle things up by trying to just positive attitude it all away, and it made me a little crazy for a while till I learned to accept and not feel guilty for normal negative feelings. I wish instead they could have had the moment of understanding first and said, It makes sense that you're feeling badly about this. It's a hard situation. Then gone on to offering solutions and encouragement. Story 55. Trying to teach them a lesson, but actually just cruelly punishing or criticizing them with the veil of doing the child a kindness. My parents call me a git, as well as other expletives, and criticize my every behavior after each outing or social gathering. It's resulted in a deeply ingrained self-hatred complex, and I have no plans to continue contact with them after I'm no longer financially dependent on them. My parents would also yell at me and my siblings in front of company to make sure everyone knew how awful we were. They go from trying to be our best friends 1 minute to spending hours yelling or lecturing us for minute mistakes. When the only two people in your life who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who make you feel the worst about yourself, it destroys the way you believe you deserve to be treated. I was in an emotionally abusive relationship for months because I was used to being treated like that from my parents, and I genuinely thought it was okay. It took direct intervention from my best friends to wake me up and see the truth. Nobody deserves to have their parents verbally abuse them under the semblance of helping them, because it helps nobody and only damages those receiving it. Story 56. This might not be a major duck-up, but it's something to think about. Growing up, I was blonde, blue-eyed, tall for my age, all the curves where you want them. I was always called pretty and beautiful. My body self-image is awesome. Even now, when I'm overweight, I'll still swim in a swimsuit with no confidence issues. My sister is brunette, brown-eyed, buck teeth, also tall but tended to hunch a little. She rarely got the body-affirming feedback that I used to get. She never put on the weight I did, but even now, she remains mostly covered up and hides her beautiful figure away unnecessarily. Story 57. Not letting them fail or deal with their own problems. 1. If the consequences happen because they didn't make the right choices, they need to understand the cause and effect relationship. 2. If the issue is simply out of their control, let them understand that some things are out of their control. Don't create entitlement when before there was simple acceptance. 3. If nothing else, do it to teach them. Failure is okay. Failure is not the end of the world. It's simply a stumbling block, and they are capable of overcoming their circumstances. Obviously, you can help and support them along the way. But I've seen too many lawnmower parents in my role as an educator and actively see how it turns kids towards a life of ignorance, entitlement, and/or perfectionism. Story 58. Big boys don't cry. This harmless saying actually causes men to become shut off from their emotions as they age and are unable to form strong emotional bonds. They can get past it, but it is a rough road. Story 59. Not having a life of your own beyond being a parent. Your child isn't responsible for your happiness. You are. If you build your entire sense of self-worth around your child one, there's a good chance your child will grow up to resent the pressure too. You're setting an example for them to be codependent in their own relationships. Story 60. Being too strict. The kid might think it's better to not be caught instead of not doing something. Dismissing kids when they say that they can't sleep, saying that laying still in bed will make they sleep. Forcing them to do anything, such as reading or sports. The kid's brain won't associate such activities as fun, but as an obligation. Pretty likely they won't take interest in doing it later in life. Forcing them to attend church with you. There's a chance this won't backfire, but more likely it will. Spoiling kids and protecting them from the outer world? Self-explanatory. Story 61. Never telling them to defend themselves against bullies, or with the added bonus of telling them to just be nice back to them, or just ignore them, and it will stop. Story 62. Not taking your kids seriously when they talk about their problems and constantly bringing up the idea that I've had it worse. Good way of getting your child to never want to speak to you about anything again. Story 63. Helping a kid too much. I have so much anxiety about failing because I never learned that failing is normal. I'm also very uncomfortable making big life decisions or taking risks without asking my parents first, and they often don't necessarily know what's best for me. Story 64. Breaking both threats and promises. You tell a kid they're not going to Disneyland if they don't stop misbehaving, you better be ready to cancel those plans. Most kids quickly realize you're lying and will just get worse in the future. You promise a kid ice cream if they do well in school, you better get them some ducking ice cream. Story 65. Haven't seen this yet. Bending over backwards to help support one child, but not explaining what's going on to the other. Specifically for families where one child is diagnosed with a disorder/disease/etc. in early childhood, not as a baby. It makes sense from a parenting standpoint that we're all working together to take care of X, but it doesn't add up to the other children. Story 66. Making passive-aggressive comments when your kid has trouble leaving their room. Stuff like, look who decided to show up, will make them not want to interact with you. Just act natural and allow them to blend into the conversation if they want to. Story 67. Invading our privacy or restricting us too much because It's for our own good, or we know more than you do. I get. It's for a good reason. But you have to let us be independent sometimes. Story 68. When I was 17, I told my father how his divorcing of my mother really ducked me up when I was 10. He laughed at me and told me to get over it. He is a social worker and grief counselor and still doesn't understand why we don't have a good relationship. Story 69. Using them as props for jokes in public. Glad you got a kick out of it, Dad. Oftentimes our parents are our first bullies. Story 70. If someone close to the family dies, don't say to your children, they're just sleeping. Congratulations, you just created a lifetime insomniac. Commenter. My 5-yo understands death. We don't sugarcoat much, and death isn't taboo. When a kid understands death as a permanent condition, it makes it easier to explain the gravity of dangerous situations.